This is the Provoked Prawn, and what you're about to see is quite possibly the best looking gaming keyboard you're ever likely to set your eyes on. This is the SteelSeries Apex 7 TKL Ghost Edition, a magnificent looking 10 keyless gaming keyboard from SteelSeries. Obviously an update to the Apex lineup, and the Ghost Edition is a limited edition with a really fancy setup that includes PBT double shot prism keycaps with a pudding starter, and that's what lets a lot of the RGB lighting through. And that is one of the things that strikes most about this keyboard, is not only does it have a wonderful per key RGB illumination, but it has a number of really nice effects and some really striking overall visuals. And this is an unboxing video and review where I'm going to be talking to you about that keyboard and showing off some of those wonderful RGB lighting effects. Now, I've always been impressed with SteelSeries Apex keyboards for the delivery of RGB and the overall build quality and the striking design of them. This one is particularly nice, and I haven't seen a keyboard like this with such wonderful RGB lighting since I looked at the HyperX Alloy Elite 2, which was wonderful because that too had pudding keycaps, and there's a lot to be said for the pudding keycap setup, letting through a lot of the wonderful RGB lighting, and the prism PBT double shot keycaps included with the SteelSeries Apex 7 are striking, wonderful to type on, and really good looking. Now, this is the view when you get it out of the box initially, and obviously when it's not plugged in, it's not quite as appealing. However, it is still a magnificent bit of kit. This is a keyboard which is built with a wonderful solid aircraft grade aluminium backplate, a detachable soft touch magnetic wrist rest, which I'll show you in a second a bit more on. It has an OLED Smart Display in the top right, dedicated media controls in the form of one button and a volume wheel, which is hit and miss, and I'll talk to you a bit more about that later on. And just an overall wonderful setup. It sports SteelSeries red mechanical gaming switches, which are linear in setup, and they have a 2mm actuation, 4mm total travels, and 45 grams of actuation force or thereabouts. And I'll leave all the specifications in the description. So they're not the fanciest switches available. The SteelSeries Apex Pro has the OmniPoint adjustable switches, which are particularly interesting. If you've not seen my video on the Pro and the Pro TK, I'll be sure to check out those links in the description, because those keyboards are magnificent with adjustable actuation on a per key basis, which is thoroughly impressive. But considering the cost of the Apex 7 TKL Ghost Edition, you are getting a seriously wonderful keyboard that is a little bit loud, perhaps, with the red switches. Certainly not the loudest I've tried, but also not completely silent. However, it is a wonderful setup. More on that later on. The keyboard also comes with this soft touch wrist rest, which isn't padded. It has like a plastic soft finish to it, and it has two magnetic clips on the top, so it just basically slides into place. As you'll see, a rubberized feet on the underside, so it doesn't move around the desk, but it just slips onto the keyboard. Another thing that you'll note is it has quite a chunky cable on it, and one with two connections. So if you plug in both these connections to your PC, you can then take advantage of the USB pass-through. So there's a port on the top, which I'll show you in a minute, which is right near the escape key that you can obviously plug in other things to. Whatever you want, a mouse or any other sort of dongle or a connection, you can plug it in there. You'll see there's also some cable channeling on the underside, which allows you to route that thick cable in whichever direction you feel would be useful. I'm going to route it in this direction because that's the way it's going to run towards my PC. That therefore minimizes the sort of mess of cable on the desk. One thing of note, as you will see from this video, is that that cable is particularly chunky because of the dual connection nature of it, so it's quite fat. From the underside, it looks quite plastic and cheap as well, but as I said, this is a solid aluminium grade finish on the top. It has a good heft in it and a good premium finish and feel to it. And here you can see the magnetic attachment of the wrist rest as well. It just slides and slips into place, and you can easily take it off if you want to. There's no clips or anything. Once you plug it in, then you'll find yourself struck by the RGB lighting and the reactive effects. I'll show you more on that in the SteelSeries software later on what you can do with that. As you'll see, some very nice visuals here. I'm going to be quiet for a moment so you can hear those red switches in action. I'll do a video separately where I'll show off these key sounds. So if you just want to hear the key sounds, then please check out the link in the description to that, which is just going to be the key sounds and none of me talking. But one thing I will note is that the spacebar is particularly loud. The stabilizers aren't that fantastic, and there's certainly a discrepancy between the larger keys, the enter key, the shift keys, and the spacebar, for example. It's not perfect. I think that keyboard enthusiasts might turn up their nose at this one. It is quite loud. However, for a standard sort of gaming keyboard from your standard brand, it is a nice setup, and it has been a pleasure to use for working and for gaming. It obviously is a little bit loud though, as you heard from that clip, and you will hear separately, and so it might get picked up by your microphone if you're a streamer, and that's worth bearing in mind. Popping the keycaps off and you can see a look at the red SteelSeries switches and also the housing for these pudding keycaps, and you'll see the overall sort of finish on them. Because they're double shot PBT keycaps, you should find that they'll last a lot longer than your standard keycaps. And yet one of the things that I was struck by is the fact they still let a lot of RGB lighting bleed through, both from the bottom and through the lettering as well. And that's one thing that a lot of PBT keycaps often suffer with, is problems with the RGB lighting. You can see the LEDs on the top of the switches here, and just because of the just overall setup of it, it lets a lot of the RGB through, the lettering on the top, and just a wonderful shine. Good quality PBT keycaps as well. I didn't find too much in the way of problems with the build quality on these. There's no issues where they've been printed weirdly or any other problems there, and it's just a good premium setup. Here you can see as well a look at that USB pass-through port at the top by the escape key. You'll see that's lit up as well, so there's a lot of RGB lighting going on here, and because of the sort of raised housing and the pudding keycaps, there's a nice bit of bleed on the surroundings. You can obviously take advantage of the pass-through ports to plug in whatever you want, and then you're away. On the right hand side, you'll note the little screen, the display, and as standard that just shows the SteelSeries logo. You can customize that within the SteelSeries engine, within SteelSeries GG, and I'll show you that in a minute. As I noted earlier on, there's also the dedicated media control keys, and you will note there are a number of other keys on here too. For example, you have a SteelSeries logo key down by the Windows key there, and then F11 and F12 will adjust the brightness. One of the things that I found is that this keyboard is incredibly bright, to the point that I actually had to turn the RGB lighting down regularly, both throughout the day and at night, because it was so bright. And I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing. It shows just how wonderfully well lit it is. And I think I'm really not doing it justice with these clips, even though it looks magnificent. It looks a lot better than this in real life. And there are numerous different effects that I'll show you in a minute when we go into the software, but I'm just giving a sample of them here. Those are the highlights. The low light, I think, for me, is the setup of the media button. So that button on the right hand side of the screen just below the volume wheel is a multi-function control button. So you can basically double press it, for example, to skip a track, or press it to play and pause, and do other things with it. So it requires multiple presses rather than having dedicated buttons where you have a play and pause and things separated into different keys. You just got one button to rule them all, which I'm not a fan of, but you know, it depends. You are obviously having a compact TKL setup here, so you do have to have some sort of compromise. And because of the screen, you obviously have less room than you would on others. For example, my G915 TKL, which is usually my favorite, that has space for the dedicated media control keys, but then it doesn't have a screen. So you obviously have to take the rough with the smooth there. There are a lot of things to like about it though, and it does have onboard memory for up to 5 different profiles as well. So you have various different things that you can program into it, and then it'll store it in the memory and the keyboard. So what you're seeing is a wonderful keyboard with loads of different appeal to it, the most of which is that striking setup and the overall aesthetic of it, the build quality and the finish on it. It's a nice keyboard to type on with that spacebar being a little bit too rattly, and if you love RGB lighting, then you're no doubt going to find this one very attractive. Now I'm going to go into the software and show you what's possible in there. And here we are within SteelSeries GG, which is where now SteelSeries engine is buried. And you will note that we have the Apex 7 here, and there are also other things of note, for example, apps and library that I'll go into in a minute. But this is where we get the main controls for the keyboard. And one of the things that I want to show you immediately is another hidden feature. So congratulations if you made it this far, because this is the second best thing about this keyboard, the RGB lighting and the meta bindings. The SteelSeries button that I mentioned earlier on in the video not only allows you to access the F keys at the top, but also allows you to access a potential secondary layer of button activations. You'll note under the meta bindings section that every key is set to deactivated as standard, but you can then set something else. So we have the ability to choose a keyboard button, for example, or you can set a macro. I'll show you more on that in a minute. You can have mouse buttons, media playback buttons, device functions, and all sorts of other things. Now, how this works is essentially what we're doing is we're selecting a key. I'm going to choose G in this example, and we're setting a keyboard button. You can also do a quick record, so we could do that. And I'm going to just, for demonstration purposes, do Shift and R, which seems like a strange thing to do, but I just want to show you something. So now I have made G into Shift and R. If I open up Notepad, if I press G, it still does G. However, if I press and hold the SteelSeries button and then press G, as long as I've saved it, which I haven't, it then types R instead. You'll have to take my word for it that I'm not pressing the R button. The other thing that's interesting is that when you've programmed these buttons, the keyboard itself will also light up a different color. So when you've programmed things here within the meta bindings layer, when you press and hold that SteelSeries button, you'll see those keys then lighting up on the keyboard itself. So as standard, your F9, F10, F11, F12 and Windows buttons are all automatically lit up. But when you add in additional buttons, as you can see, I've added the G in, so that G is now lighting up. So you all know at a glance which ones you've programmed. This is a brilliant bit of customization and something that I've seen with Razer's Hypershift technology and Rockat's Easy Shift, which gives you a lot more flexibility with a 10 keyless keyboard, because you're obviously limited by the number of keys, but now you have a secondary layer of action. Yes, you have to press that SteelSeries button, which in the middle of a game isn't necessarily ideal, but that does mean that you can then program in extra things, whether it's a macro, another button press, a key customization, one of the other options. You have the ability to do all sorts of things here, and that is certainly a nice setup. It includes as well mouse buttons, so you could assign mouse buttons to the keyboard, so plenty of different options to do in here, and that is one of the wonders of it. You can also easily, if you need to, reset these to default. You can deactivate it and go back to standard, just remembering to save when you've finished. The key binding setups, these allow you to change, so you can reprogram keys as well. So you can not only add a secondary layer of action, but you can go through and you could set up and reprogram your keys entirely and set them up. As I showed already, you can do a quick record, so you can set up keys there, or you can set a dedicated macro. You'll notice that there's a macro launcher in here, and when you start to record macros, you're going to see a simple and easy to use interface. You have a delay thing on here. You can set it and delete delay. You can set to remove things entirely. You can delete parts of them, and you can adjust it with a fixed delay or no delay, so you can set it from the recordings there. So you have all sorts of options to be able to record macros and add them into buttons either as a secondary action or as a main action. And because you have 5 onboard profiles, you could obviously set a different one for different games, and more on that in a minute, and then launch those specific actions and set up configs when you go into that game versus using in Windows, for example. You also have the illumination. I've already shown you a lot of the RGB lighting effects, but here you can see we have single color, we have color shift, which goes through different colors, gradients, breathing, the whole keyboard effects, which is chasing ghosts, and these are the ones sort of moving across the keyboard, haze and things like that. And you also have the reactive layers, and that's one of the things that I think is the nicest, because you can basically have it so when you press a button, it goes across the entire line that you've pressed from, it ripples out from a certain place, or it fades with each key press. So you've got loads of different customization here. You can obviously also do it on a per key basis, or you can drag and select certain sections. So you have plenty of different options. You can also set it for AFK mode, so you can set the lighting to turn off after a certain period of time. A display itself, you'll see, as I said before, is set for the SteelSeries logo as standard, and you can edit that, so you could tweak it and customize and put in your own logo if you wanted to. Where this becomes a bit more interesting potentially is within the apps section. So in the apps section, you can go into System Monitor, for example. You can click to configure that. And when you turn that on, you'll then get data and information on your CPU load and GPU data on the display visible to see. And this is obviously beneficial because you can see that data at a glance. That could be particularly useful if you want to see what's going on with your screen. One of the things that I noted previously with this little display is that it's kind of hidden at the back of the keyboard. It's not easy to see unless you're sitting bolt upright. So this is kind of hit and miss on whether it's actually useful or gimmicky. You'll see there are also other options in here. There's plenty of different apps that you can set up. So there are ones for Discord. You have Audio Visualizer, which adds in some nice effects based on music that's playing, and that will then go across the entire keyboard. So again, more RGB lighting effects. The Discord one will basically set up so it'll let you know when people have joined a channel, and you can do that so it runs on the screen as well, so you could see people adding into the channel. You can set up so you have events, so you can see, for example, when a user joined the channel, user left the channel, when you've joined, disconnected, muting and other things. All of that is visible on the screen and the display, so you don't have to worry about looking or listening out for Discord notifications. And there are other apps in here. One of the things that's sorely missing, unfortunately, one thing that used to be on these displays is Spotify integration, so you could see what music was playing, but they don't have that anymore for some reason. That's sadly missing, and that's a shame. Now, in the library section, you'll notice that you can also set it up so particular games, and you can scan for game or add an individual game here, will launch a specific configuration. So you could set up the keyboard, as I said earlier, so that you have a specific layout, whether it's meta key bindings or standard layouts, that will automatically be ready for action when you launch a game, a particular game up, and then they're ready to go. So as you can see, the Apex 7 TKL Ghost Edition is wonderful for a number of different reasons, not least of which is the wonderful build aesthetic, the overall look and build quality of it, but also the customization that's available within the software, the fact that you can dive into so many different things and add in secondary layers of buttons as well. Plenty of different options to play around with here. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Thanks for watching. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well. And have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel. And most importantly, have a great life.